I know personal, you're an open book. Business, sometimes not as much, which is ironic, but I get it, given your line of work. Can we talk about deeds?
Yes, absolutely.
Can we talk about deeds?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I know some of the investors are salivating listening to this, and they're like, all right, so where's the juicy money-making niche stuff? Is this your second time back? Welcome back.
Yeah, so the first time I was here was the first time you and I actually met face-to-face.
Crazy, right? How long ago was that?
I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, and which is what prompted me to call you and say, Charles, it's been a while, man. Let's get the band back together.
I feel like I've known you forever, though.
I know.
I feel
well,
like it's been a freaking decade.
Yes.
But so listen, where do we even freaking start here? You've lived an insanely colorful life. I would say you've probably lived the life of 5 or 6 people, right?
Somewhere's around there.
The road, both personally and professionally, has been just, it's literally a movie. But you have become what I consider to be, and anybody who's ever worked with you, in my opinion, the most talented real estate litigator on Long Island, in the area, maybe the East Coast, who knows? I mean, it's scary, bro. You're a scary man. Like your brother puts it perfectly. It's like, thank God I'm conflicted out, because if my brother was on the other side of me in a litigation, the only thing you could do is shoot him, because otherwise there's just that's it. Like, you are just an absolute technician in what you do.
Well, I appreciate your kind words. I take pride in my line of work, and I've just been a hard worker my whole life. So what I lack in intelligence, what I lack in creativity, I make up for in dedication to my craft. I enjoy the law. I think it's fascinating. I think it makes sense to me, which helps me help my clients as I understand nuances. But I'm small enough that I have the luxury of taking some of these cases on personally. And I've talked to you about this before, is that I don't work for a giant white shoe firm where I'm assigned cases from clients that I'll never speak to. I know you. I know my clients. I know their personal affairs. And when one of my clients is harmed, I have the option of making it my problem, saying, you know what, I feel harmed because I have that limited amount of client base. And I do that on purpose. I tell people all the time, I turn down probably 75 to 80% of the people who walk through my door for one or more reasons. And more times than not, it's just because that I won't be able to deliver to them the personal attention that I expect of myself to provide my client base, and my clients have expected to receive. Is that the more clients I take, the less personal attention, and I'm not willing to sacrifice that or to jeopardize the relationships I have with clients like you because I decide to become busy with new business. You will always be able to call me. You will always be able to count on me to be there for you when you're in a jam, when something comes up. And I like being that guy. I hate using the word now ever since Michael Cohen got labeled with it, but a fixer. I like being the fixer. I don't like Michael Cohen's version of fixing, but I like being a fixer within the confines of the law, of course, and creating unique solutions to legal problems.
So you and I, outside of our personal relationship, you and I have a very unique relationship. And what I mean by that is this. Most people, when they have to call a lawyer, they're not happy about it because it's going to cost them money. There's some type of a problem. When I call you, I'm like, this is great because this is an investment and I know that I'm going to make money. So we've done all kinds of crazy, funky stuff. And the best thing is you get excited about it. You're like, send me the craziest, shit that you have. We've done share purchases. We've done all kinds of things. And you just don't lose, man. It's just, you don't. So that's the thing. When I call you, I know I have a scenario. I know the scenario is going to make money, and I know that Justin is going to be able to do this in a way that nobody else can. And the money is really in the nuances of real estate. Like, you can make money in real estate doing all kinds of stuff, yes. But you have to get into that really niche-y type of stuff that you and I end up doing together. Like, for example, if you want to elaborate on that situation where I bought that 50% ownership in that property.
With your permission, I will.
Lay it out.
Okay, so you came to me with a scenario where your team had been in touch with an individual who just wanted out of his house so bad. The problem was the gentleman was divorced. The divorce decree stated, the judgment, that the property was to be sold, I think within 30 days or whatever amount of days after the oldest child had turned 18. Now, that oldest child had turned 18 years ago. And the ex-wife, who's living at that property, just was not on board. You can't force somebody to do something unless you bring him to court. So, he didn't want to obviously get violent with his ex-wife. And listen, he would constantly ask her to buy him out. She wouldn't do it. So you were able to make a deal with this gentleman for what was a very good price, where you were able to buy his half interest in the property. Now, again, the judgment said that she was supposed to sell. She didn't sell. So what happens in a case like that is you have to do a partition where one of the owners sues the other one in court for the court to direct the sale of the property and to divide up the proceeds. He didn't want to be involved with his ex-wife because the other thing too is a matrimonial court retains jurisdiction over a divorce. So since this was part of the judgment divorce, an argument could be made that he couldn't even bring a partition action. He'd have to go back into the matrimonial court and have this, vetted out. And there's some equity in there. It's kind of a headache. So he was smart to just say, let me get as much money as I can to get the hell out of this. So you bought his interest and this became your problem. Now, you, not being this woman's ex-husband, had all the rights in the world to start a partition action. Now, another big thing that was in your benefit and part of our due diligence, and if I were to sum up what I do for you most, it's due diligence. It's to see how you can be screwed, how to avoid you losing money, and how to give you the chance of making money, and then quantifying how much that can be. So that due diligence yielded that you would not be barred from filing this partition action because of a new deed theft amendment to Heirs Property Partition Act in New York. It's a complicated statute, but you were exempt from this. So we commenced the action, and people usually become a little more eager to do something when they're being sued and they have to get dragged into court. And like you said, when they have to call an attorney to pay money. So this ex-wife was comfortable for a long time. Her husband was threatening her with all these things, but he never did anything. So she could just sit back and do nothing. By selling his interest to you, you had ownership interest in the property. You were not sitting around. You took action. We commenced a partition proceeding, and she hired counsel, which is always good and bad. I'd rather deal with an attorney than to deal with somebody who's not represented because they don't know the law. They don't know when their position's weak or good. So she hired counsel, and we moved fast. We immediately moved for, she put in an answer, and so we immediately moved for summary judgment, and it was unopposed. So that was granted. And at that point, now a referee was appointed to decide how much you guys were going to split the proceeds of the property. So this
really fast.
This was in
too.
months, really fast because we had no impediments. We had no, this deed theft and heirs partition act to deal with. So we were able to move very quickly. And fortunately, her attorney gave her good advice, saying, "Listen, this is going to happen, and if it goes down this road, you have no control over the mechanics of this deal. It's going to go to an auction. An independent referee is going to assess who's owed what, who gets what, and there's too many things that are out of your control." So she got a good advice from counsel and was, encouraged to settle, which we did come to a settlement. I think was within 4 or 5 months of the day that you called me saying this is the deal, and you made a windfall of a profit in a small period of time and with little to no risk exposure. So that's what I would call an ideal scenario where it's profitable, it's fast, and it's finite. Whereas we're not dealing with the swings of litigation because, you've seen on any given day, an appeal could take 2 years. Litigation goes on forever. Settlement is the best business model when it comes to what you're doing in a situation like that. In court you can make more money because there's uncertainty, but in order for you to quantify your time, in order for you to figure out your value proposition of any investment, you need to know your numbers. And settlement lets you know this is how much you get on this date for this amount. It'll be in this time frame, and you can do your math and realize this was a good investment.
So just to give people some of the details, right? So everybody knows. We bought it for now. There's risk involved, but when you do stuff like this, it's calculated risk. So
due diligence. That's all it comes down to. There's tons of risk when you don't do due diligence. When you hire me, the best money you spend, and I say this to any real estate investor, I get calls all the time. Yeah, you're the man. I heard all these great things. So I got all these scenarios. I got all this money to be made. All right, I sent them a retainer agreement. I was all right. You got to put me on retainer, and the retainer agreement is $20,000. They go, well, I want to just call you. So you see, you don't understand something. You called me knowing that I'm really good at something, and then you expected me to just kind of work for you for free. I was like, every minute I spend with you, I take away from a Charles. I take away from my other investors. So you need to buy my time up front if you want to be a part of this more times than not, they never follow through, which is good for you because when it comes to your competition of people you're competing with to purchase property, there are way more people on this level down here than where you're at here, where you've got A, the funds, and B, the intelligence to know that the money spent up here it's crucial in making these big deals. Because like you said, anyone can make money in real estate, but the real money is made in these nitty-gritty deals that are outside the box. That it's not a vanilla deal. There's complications everywhere, and that's where the money's made.
So this particular deal, we bought the rights for $28,000, and we ultimately ended up selling in a short period of time for $145,000, which is awesome. But I mean, everybody just look at that and be like, oh, that's amazing. But is it easy? Yes. Could it have been a nightmare? Absolutely. The reason why it was easy is because you're here. So A, you were doing the due diligence in front. B, partition actually can take sometimes 3, 7, 10, 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? The point is when you have the right team and you do the right due diligence and you have the right deals and it all comes together, it comes together and you hit it out of the park. So that was one of those good ones. Listen, sometimes you take your lumps. Sometimes you hit a bunch of singles. Every once in a while you hit a home run. That was a home run. So I think it's also, we talked about this on the last podcast, but I think it's really relevant to bring up again, the way you went about getting your law license, right? So, and I think it's funny because as I get older and I think about professionals, like obviously you're licensed to practice law, you're a lawyer, but people that normally have licenses, like I know people that aren't attorneys that are way smarter in different verticals of law than actual lawyers. You have it all, but the way you ended up becoming an attorney was I've never heard of. Like until I met you, I was like, I didn't even think that was possible. Have you ever met anybody else that got their license the same way?
Not the exact same way. So I've met people who didn't graduate law school that got their license, because to get a Juris Doctorate degree, you have to finish school within 5 years. Some people do law school part-time, and because they're working, they've got family, whatever the obligations are, and they just don't finish in 5 years. They're not allowed to continue legal education at that point. They're done. You can't do any more than 5 years. But since they did some time in law school, they mixed that in with this law office study. They were able to take the bar and pass the bar and become an attorney without graduating law school. But I have never met anyone else who had the purpose and intent of going in for only 1 year with the sole purpose of then going through law office study and becoming an attorney.
Oh, you planned it out from the beginning.
It was the only way. I mean, when I went to law school in 2013, it was against the advice of everyone I love and know, everyone I respect, and they were saying, this is your time frame. This is the hours you work. You're married. You've got kids. It's your full-time job. Like, show me where you think you can fit in full-time law school. I'm like, you're right. On paper, this is impossible. I was like, I'm not getting younger. If I don't do this now, do we think that I'm going to gain time? I was like, no, it's going to be worse. So I was like, I'm just going to try it. So the way it works is, first off, in order to become an attorney in New York without graduating law school, you have to have a bachelor's degree. So you still need your bachelor's degree, right? So I had that. And then after that, you still have to get into law school and go to law school for at least 1 year. So you got to take the LSAT, the law school entrance exam, which I'm a terrible standardized test taker. My ADD's off the charts. I'm looking around, I'm hearing things.
I don't know how you have the attention span to sit and research and do these types of things.
So what people don't know is most people who truly have ADD, not like this fake stuff out there where people just refuse to work hard or whatever they want to do. Mine's coupled with OCD, which they call it a disorder. It is my best quality, my best and worst. And we've talked about this before, is that it harms me because I have a very tough time delegating. I have a very tough time, working on macro. I get consumed in micro, but my attention to detail is that my OCD, it's off the charts in some things. And I'm sure my poor associate, Dan, he shows me grace, but I am OCD on the littlest nuances. It probably drives him crazy, but I look at it like it's deal breakers, like the biggest issues. So you go through this, I take the LSATs, I get a horrific score. I think it was like a 140 something. I mean, I only got into one law school. I couldn't even get into any other law school. I got into, unfortunately, Toro, I'm sorry, but you're the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to New York law school. So Toro Law School's in Central Islip. Great, because my office is in Bohemia. So I was like, all right, I got in. Now, they offered me even scholarship money. So the fact that because I had a really good GPA. Basically they take your GPA, they take your LSAT scores, that's where they come up with whether or not you're in and whatnot. So they came to me and they gave me scholarship money. So the fact that I heard that they're willing to give me money, I figured there's got to be more on the table. So I go in there. I was like, so, this is what you're offering me. I was like, you're going to have to do better. Why not? So I postured. I was like, listen, I have other options. I didn't.
You never told me this part.
Yeah. So there was City University.
Did this work?
Of course it did. So the City University of New York has another, it was a law school that I applied to that my application was pending. I didn't even know, but I was rejected eventually. But I was like, listen, I've got other options. I got CUNY, on the table. So what can you do? It's like, well, this is what we're offering. I was like, make me happy. I was like, make me feel like I'm wanted, make me feel important. So they came up with a decent number. So I then handed them my credit card. I was like, all right, swipe it. Excuse me. So I paid for the year on my credit card. I get a call from financial aid. They're like, listen, we understand that you didn't take loans and you finance school through your credit card. We have to tell you, we have to give financial counseling. This is terrible. You could have, debt and all. I was like, you assume that I just didn't pay it off that month. She goes, you did? I was like, yes, I paid off my credit card bill that month. I wanted the points. She goes, oh, dismissed. So I do my 1 year and I skate. I go, whatever the teacher said, the most amount of absences were allowed, I used them. In class, I was doing legal work for my law firm at the time because I was a paralegal. I just skated. I absolutely skated. I was able to get some good grades, not some good grades, but the thing is you have to finish at least 1 year in good standing. Now, good standing is essentially like a C+ average, and you have to be able to continue legal education. So I finished my 1 year, I was in good standing, and I wrote an application to New York's highest court. It's the Court of Appeals. They govern licensing attorneys. And I asked for permission to commence what's called the Law Office Study Program. And this is Rule 520.4 under the Court of Appeals. And they say that if you finish 1 year of law school in good standing, you can then move forward by working under the supervision of one or more attorneys for a period of 3 years. So it's 4 years altogether, 1 year of law school, 3 years of work study. So 4 years. And if you do that successfully, and you submit these documents to prove that you did it, and you didn't take too much vacation time, you have to document how much time you were out of work, then you're eligible to sit in to take the bar exam. Now, if you pass the bar exam and the related exams, which is basically like an ethics exam and a New York part of the exam, so it's 3 tests you have to take, that's it, you get your license. So most people don't realize that this is still possible. Most people think you have to get your Juris Doctorate degree, you got to graduate law school. You do not. You just need that 1 year. And I passed the bar exam my first time around because I hired the best tutor money could buy. And I think I shouted out last time, and I'll do it again. Ken Leff, best tutor money could buy. He was God's gift to the bar. And I passed, and it was amazing. And my last day of the bar exam, my wife went into labor. I had to run out of New York City, jump on the train. A tree fell on the tracks. I had to get an Uber from the city to Stony Brook. I had to pay the Uber $100 to smoke a cigar in his Uber because there was no smoking allowed. But I was like, listen, I just took a 2-day exam. Like, I'm smoking in here. So what are we going to do here? But yes, it is still possible. And I encourage people who have an entrepreneurial mind to do this. I let people call me all the time about how to do it, what paperwork has to be filled, because schools don't exactly promote this because they want you to pay tuition and all that. But if someone's smart, like you said, you've met plenty of smart people who know the law, better than any attorney. Someone like that, as long as they get an undergraduate degree, they can pursue this with 1 year of law school. And I would encourage anyone who's got a level head to do so.
But to be a great attorney, it's a lot of different things, and I don't think school has anything to do with it. And you have, like, when I want to do something, I call you and I'm like, let's go to dinner. I got a problem. Let's work it out. And usually by dessert, if not early, usually you come prepared with, let's say 85% of it, like, yeah, it's already in the bag. And then we have a great time at dinner. And then as soon as dessert hits, whatever tough problem we needed to solve is already solved. And I mean, to be a great attorney, you have to think outside the box. You have to be a great negotiator, obviously. You have to have a set of balls. Okay, you can't be a good attorney if you don't have a set of balls.
We've talked about this before. Depending on what kind of law you're practicing. I mean, if I was a wills, trust, and estate transactional attorney, I'm not sure how big my testicles need to be to draft a will and all that. But when you're involved in litigation, when you have the right client too, because you're talking about going to dinner and whatnot. I'm only as good as you let me be. If I have a bad client who doesn't give me the information that I require, like you have every answer I need. they may not be good answers, but you give me the answers I'm looking for. So,
and you've talked me off the ledge a bunch of times. I'm like, we're suing this guy. I don't care. And you're like, listen, this isn't the right move. Okay, you're right.
And again, that's because I'm objective. I've been, the litigant. I've been the party in the litigation where I'm not objective and I have to hire counsel because when it's me, we're going to war. It'll blow everything, no settlement, no nothing. And then I hire an attorney to look at me and say, Justin, no. So you're good because A, you listen. B, you're smart. Like you help me problem solve just as much as I help you. Like I'll tell you, you'll give me a scenario. I'll start telling you the law. And then you'll start telling me some other things about what you're doing and some ideas that I wouldn't have thought because I'm not in your line of work. You tell me your ideas, and because you're smart, you make my job a lot easier. So one thing is I'm only as successful as my clients allow me to be. You're a good client because
thank you.
You listen and you give me great information. Those two things are great. The other thing too is when you find a good attorney, I understand my job really clearly. It's to do what's in your best interest. Sometimes that's against what you really think is in your best interest. Like when I tell you to do or not do something, I'm not saying it because it makes me money or anything like that. Like I do it because my job is to do what is best for you financially, ethically, whatever it may be. And I'm glad that you trust me with that because I take that seriously. And with all my clients, I take that very seriously. There's a common, I don't even know if you want to call it a misconception, but some people believe that their attorneys are only in it for the money. I've heard so many bad complaints. Yeah, my attorney billed me for all this stuff, did nothing for me. All they cared about was their money. And I've never worked for a firm. I've only worked for myself, essentially. So I don't know about that to be factual, but I know for certain when you do something, I look at you like, all right, if this was my mother, if this was me, what would I say to that person? And how would I advise that person? So when you have a deal, it's my money. Yeah. It's my money that's on the line. And I know, even that last one that we settled with the holdover proceeding, I know it pains you to give that person money that you was not deserved. It was not money, but I told you to do the math.
Painful, man.
I told you to do the math. We figured out the math on it, and it made sense. Rather than paying me to win over a couple months, it made sense to pay that undeserving person that much money in that period of time because financially it saved you and saved you money and made you money, as opposed to any other scenario where you didn't pay it, where you wouldn't have saved as much or you wouldn't have made as much. So as much as you personally hated it, it was the best decision.
No, it was. That's true. Steve Jobs has that saying about how you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. You've heard of that before?
I have.
So for you to be as good as you are, you've had to have experience. And I would argue you'd have to have certain genetics. Right. So like,
I think there's some personality matters.
I mean, I've never met your father. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but I've heard a lot of amazing stories about him.
I've heard him too, because he wasn't really around for us when we were growing up, but I've heard stories and I've seen,
there's got to be some genetics in there though.
I think so. I you know what? There's personability. Some people are affable and some people are kind of dry. I was litigating against this one attorney who had a very tough time with the English language. He's not from the States, and I don't know if this was the reason why he was, what in my opinion was so bad at his job, but he was talking in circles, and the judges, he couldn't read the room. Like the judges were looking at him like, we're past this, move on. This is what we're talking about. And like, he wasn't listening to the judges. So, I mean, there are just certain things that even if you're not born with the genetics of being just, affable or conversational or having a tough time in, a public setting, like you need to learn. These are things you can learn to read the room. Like look at people when you're talking to them, see their reactions. Like I paid for that boat that I sunk with poker winnings. Poker winnings was me and delivering pizzas. It was me reading people in the room. And again, when you were talking about, the size of testicles, we're talking about sometimes I could read a weakness in someone and I know that I could bluff or I could make a scene of some sort and they will back down to it. And then some people will, when they get confronted with an argument, they feel they need to be defensive. So those are the people that I can't initiate or trigger. I got to play like I'm the calm, collective one in the back, because that's how we're talking about personality profiles.
Yeah.
And it's critical in hiring, and it's critical in the practice of law if you want to do any kind of litigation and be successful at it, is you got to be able to read the room. You got to know how the person it's rhetoric. The argument you're trying to make, you got to know who's receiving that argument and how they receive information. And that's why even before a case, I study my judges. I read their part rules. I find out their political affiliations. I find out how they became a judge, what their prior practice was, so that when I say, oh, Justice so-and-so, you would understand, because back when you were, in private practice and you were doing the contract law, you represented so-and-so in that case that you won. Now, irrelevant to the case, but I just made a personal connection with the person who's going to determine my client's fate. And it's usually appreciated. It's usually like, thank you, counselor. Thank you for noting that. Yes, that was a case, because most people do like to talk about themselves. So give them the opportunity. Little things like that sometimes can make or break a case.
So I would argue you could have been an amazing any kind of attorney. You could have been a corporate attorney. You could have been a criminal defense attorney. You could have been anything. Is there anything about the road that you've traveled, or I guess eventually it's like this? What made you decide to stick a pin in real estate?
Kind of like a family tradition. My father being in mortgage banking, my mother being in real estate. My dad was a real estate investor. My older brother, Sal, big influence in my life, was in mortgage banking, real estate investing. He was flipping property. So I've been around it my whole life. It's kind of all I've ever known. It's just kind of where I fell. It wasn't a conscious decision. I just kind of always been around it, and that's what I've known.
It's just interesting how those things, how just your experiences and things like that, and your influences and things that you see end up leading you to a certain place.
And it would be different if I was like the 99% of the other people I saw in law school, these kids who were right out of undergraduate, never worked a day in their lives. Maybe their family told them they have to be an attorney. Maybe there's no attorneys in my family. I was the first person in my family to go to college. My mom graduated high school, so I was the second person in my family to ever graduate high school. I was the first person in my family to ever go to college. Didn't have anyone pushing me in there in any direction. So it was just what was around me, and these kids I saw in law school, they had no idea, and they were looking to get hired by some big firm, which usually doesn't happen if you went to Toro. And they're just aimless. Most of them hated their jobs, and half of them don't even practice law anymore. So it was just, I was always around it. I understood it. Mm-hmm. And I saw that there was money to be made in the line of work. And because of my understanding, I was really good at it.
Can we, I know personal, you're an open book. Business, sometimes not as much, which is ironic, but I get it, given your line of work. Can we talk about deeds?
Yes, absolutely.
Can we talk about deeds?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I know some of the investors are salivating listening to this, and they're like, all right, so where's the juicy money-making niche stuff? So before we were talking about the partition action, things like that, because this litigation is a very powerful tool if utilized in the right way, in the right situation with the proper due diligence. So we don't even necessarily have to go down deeds, but if you want to talk about some of the strategies that you utilize with some of the investors that you work with, I think that would be very powerful for people.
Sure, yeah. So when it comes to, what I believe you're referring to as deeds, is some investors expedite the process of obtaining ownership in a property by just buying the deed as is, quitclaim deeds. So you buy a deed to a property that has $1 million mortgage against it, you're paying maybe $20,000, $50,000, whatever number you paid, you paid for this deed. So now you're the owner of the property, but it's in foreclosure. The property owes $1 million against it. What did you buy? So the first thing is, there are, as I said, in 2024, New York State passed deed theft amendments, basically, where there are new laws that make it extremely difficult for an investor to buy a deed in connection with anyone who was, let's say, left a decedent left property to family members, an heir of some sort of property. That's almost impossible. You don't want to stay away from it, because there are so many ways to unravel those deals that even if everything is above board and compliant with the law, it leaves the investor with way too much risk. So those deals are kind of off the table. But let's just say, for the clients that I have that were buying deeds on property that are in foreclosure, I always tell them the first thing you want to do is see if you can find vacant properties. Vacant properties are basically excluded from any kind of deed protection statutes, because, again, those statutes were made for a good reason. They don't want savvy investors stealing homes from people who don't have the wherewithal or understanding of the value of that property. Even if they're in foreclosure, there's still plenty of value there, and we speak about this. Whereas deeds, they buy a deed for $20,000, the property's vacant, it's a 4-family in Brooklyn. First thing you do is you do the rehab costs, and you start renting the property out. So whatever the rehab is, whatever that number is, you start getting rental in there. So all of a sudden now you've already got income and you're recouping your investment. Now, none of my clients go into these deals blind. They've already hired me to do the due diligence on the foreclosure. Now, foreclosures are dismissed for various reasons. There's umpteen defenses that can be raised in relation to foreclosure. Of course, it's timing predicated. You have to make sure these are timely raised defenses. But when the situation presents itself, these investors go in with a hybrid approach. First thing is rent the property out, start recouping the investment. Second thing is engage the litigation, because litigation could either end in a windfall where maybe I can get a statute of limitations dismissal and the mortgage will be deemed time barred. It could be removed from the property, and therefore the people own the property for the amount that they put into it, basically, which is, the profit margins of those are four-figure percentages, thousands of percent of profit margin. But the hybrid approach is the settlement. I always tell you, settlement's finite. So we'll press forth with litigation and the bank will come back with a discounted payoff. Whereas, the mortgage, let's say they'll agree to a $300,000, a payoff figure, where now my client factors the cost. They just bought a 4-family in Brooklyn for, let's say, $350, $400 all in. It's a good deal. It's a really good deal. So most of them will find these vacant properties are the bread and butter. And it's simple because a lot of these investors have realtors out on the street hustling. And anytime you see boards on a property, first thing they do is they find out a skip trace on who was the prior owner. They pull the deed and they do a skip trace to find out where that prior owner lives now. They contact the prior owner in the Carolinas or Florida. Puerto Rico was one of them I remember doing. And they go, listen, I see you abandoned this property. Like, yeah, it was in foreclosure. We'll buy your deed. They'll buy the deed, and then they'll move forward with this strategy. So the deed purchases are still very possible. And it's not just the city, the island as well, but the city has the benefit of multifamily dwellings, whereas you can do rentals here on the island, mostly single family residences, maybe 2 families. But, and again, people usually don't leave. People got smart over the years where they realize these foreclosures take 5 or 10 years. They don't actually have to leave. But back in 2007, 2008, people thought, well, if I'm in foreclosure, I got to go. Now, these New York State notices that are required, state on there, you do not have to leave your property. This is going to take a while. So there are plenty of good ways to make money as an investor purchasing deeds or just distressed real estate. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. Anyone who's delinquent, tax foreclosure, we talk about mechanics liens foreclosures, judgment foreclosures, anyone involved in litigation, there's usually some meat on that deal.
Yeah, I mean, again, the key is in the niches, and to be creative. So I would encourage any investor out there, if you have a deal that is a little bit different and you want to get creative, reach out to Justin, have the conversation. It's worth it to invest the money up front to get the education, A, for the next time, B, to have him in your tool belt, in your arsenal. And then maybe you get lucky and it ends up turning into an amazing deal like our deal out in East Patchogue.
Yeah, these deals, I mean, the numbers on them are outstanding. I just this month alone, January, well, now we're in February, but January 2025, I had 2 statute of limitations wins where one was a property in Queens, well over $1 million property. The guy now owns it free and clear. And one in Nassau County, property worth about $700,000. He now owns a property free and clear, and the bank had to pay our attorney's fees on this. So, I mean, these are huge windfalls. And now, as they own the property free and clear, they can refinance the property. They can mortgage, soak out the equity, take the cash, and do whatever the heck they want with it. They could leave or they could sell it for cash and just go move down south. So this is not like something that just, it's a rare occasion. People go, no one really gets a free house. No, they do. It really does happen.
It does happen with some people. With most people, it doesn't. But with some people like yourself.
And investors, I tell them, you don't want to see this yet. I mean, some of these cases go on for 10 years. As an investor, you can't make a business model based on a 10-year litigation model. You want to settle.
Yeah.
I'll get you the leverage, then we'll make the deal.
I think one of the biggest lessons that you've taught me and you preach over and over again is you don't want to be a pig, right? Like bulls make money, bears make money, pigs get slaughtered.
Absolutely.
Go in there, reasonable ask, make your money, keep it moving. Velocity of money is the way to do it.
Absolutely. Turn it over. Move on to the next, because once you start getting time committed, pot committed, all of a sudden then you forget that this is a business. You forget that this is about just making dollars and cents, and now it's like personal. Now it's like, well, I went into this thinking I was going to win. It's like holding on to a bad investment because one day maybe it'll turn good. No, just cut your losses and move forward and use this money for a good reason moving forward, and don't waste any more time on this. So yeah, you and I do a good job at doing things in and out fast next, not being tied into any one specific deal.
So if anybody's out there who's in real estate, investing in the boroughs, out on Long Island, Justin's the guy you absolutely need to know. Listen, I appreciate you coming down. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate you as the attorney doing the things you do for me every day and keeping me safe. So thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to know you.
And I love you as well, buddy. I have the luxury, like I said, of picking my clients, and I get to pick clients I like, and you're on the top of that list. So I appreciate you having me on the show, and I enjoy working with you.
Justin Pane, ladies and gentlemen, if people want to reach out to you, how do they get in touch with you? How do they find you?
Don't call me, no. My website, panelaw.com, and my office number is 631-244-1433. You'll most likely not speak to me directly. You will speak to someone at my staff who will take whatever it is you're calling me about, feed it to me, and it will be vetted.
If you're a real estate investor, make the phone call, make the connection. I guarantee you'll thank me for it.